May 10, 1940. The German invasion of France begins. At dawn, the silence of the Ardennes is broken by engines, steel, and boots pounding the earth. Columns of tanks, trucks, and infantry pour into terrain that French generals had long considered impossible for mechanized forces. For decades, the Ardennes was seen as nature's fortress: dense forests, narrow roads, steep hills that seemed to choke the movement of armor. But the German High Command saw opportunity. If their divisions could move quickly enough, the Allies would be caught off guard. Speed was the essence of Blitzkrieg, and speed is exactly what they delivered. German panzer units surged through the forest with astonishing momentum. No long pauses, no exhaustion visible. It was as if the soldiers had been remade into tireless machines. Yet behind this stunning military advance lay something hidden. A small white tablet tucked into the pockets of drivers, tank crews, and foot soldiers. The pill was called Pervitin, methamphetamine. Developed in 1937 by Temmler Pharmaceuticals in Berlin, by 1940 it was being issued by the millions. The Wehrmacht called it a stimulant. The soldiers called it Panzer chocolate. To many, it was simply the secret fuel of Blitzkrieg. Pervitin erased sleep, it dulled hunger, it pushed fear into the background and made men feel unstoppable. Reports from the front confirm the impossible. Tank drivers steering through 2 days and nights without blinking. Infantry marching 80 kilometers, then storming enemy positions as if fresh from rest. Combat engineers building bridges across the Meuse under fire, eyes wide, jaws clenched, movements mechanical. The Allies were stunned. French officers, captured after days of retreat, swore that German soldiers fought like men possessed. Winston Churchill himself marveled at reports of divisions moving day and night without falter. It defied everything known about human endurance. But there was a darker truth. When the effects wore off, soldiers collapsed into despair. Their hearts raced uncontrollably. Hands shook violently. Doctors quietly noted the crashes, the addictions, the fraying of young minds. Still, in May 1940, Germany's advance through the Ardennes stood as a terrifying success, fueled not only by tanks and tactics, but by chemistry itself. And as the Meuse River loomed ahead, a question lingered. Could this artificial endurance carry an entire nation to victory, or would the cost soon come due? The Ardennes offensive was only the beginning. Germany's high command had a clear objective: punch through the French defenses at Sedan, then drive relentlessly toward the English Channel, cutting off British and French armies from escape. General Heinz Guderian, the architect of armored warfare, pushed his panzer divisions like no one before him. He demanded speed, he demanded precision. Not 1 hour of rest, he declared, and for 3 days his men obeyed. But this pace came at a price. Fuel trucks strained to keep up, engines overheated, men should have collapsed from exhaustion. Instead, they swallowed more tablets. Pervitin became the hidden engine of Blitzkrieg. A German driver later wrote in his diary, "I had been at the wheel for more than 2 days. My eyes burned, my head was light, but the pills kept me alert. Without them, I would have driven us all into the ditch." Infantry soldiers described marching through mud with packs that cut into their shoulders. Their bodies screamed for rest, but their minds were sharp, restless, and cold. One recalled that after 60 hours awake, he no longer felt fear. Everything was mechanical. We advanced, we fired, we advanced again. The French defenders at Sedan faced a nightmare. They expected the Germans to pause before the Meuse River, to regroup, to rest. Instead, they kept coming, day and night, like an unbroken tide. French officers could not understand it. How could an entire army fight without rest? How could engineers build bridges under artillery fire, as if immune to fatigue? Even Churchill, reading reports from the front, shook his head in disbelief. Meanwhile, within the German ranks, doctors were watching closely. Dr. Otto Friedrich Ranke, who first tested Pervitin, noted both the benefits and the dangers. In the short term, it produced superhuman stamina. In the long term, it left men hollow, trembling, and addicted. Still, orders kept flowing. Temmler Pharmaceuticals shipped millions more tablets. The Wehrmacht had tasted the power of chemical endurance, and the High Command wanted more. By mid-May, the Panzers stood at the Meuse, a river that had broken armies before. The French believed it would buy them time. But the Germans, wired, tireless, relentless, were preparing to cross. The real turning point was near, and the price of Blitzkrieg would be paid in blood, sweat, and chemical fire. The Meuse River, May 13th, 1940. A line of water that French commanders believed would slow the German tide. But on that day, history bent under the weight of speed, fire, and chemistry. At Sedan, German engineers rushed forward. Bridges had to be built under constant shelling. Normally, men would falter. Hands would shake. Fear would grip the body. But witnesses said the soldiers worked like machines. They laid planks, hammered beams, and guided pontoons across the current while explosions rained around them. Infantry units surged over the makeshift crossings. They had been awake for more than 60 hours, yet their eyes blazed with a strange clarity. They pressed on through villages, forests, and hills, firing in bursts, advancing without pause. One French officer later confessed, they moved as if fear had been stripped away, as if fatigue did not exist. By nightfall, the German bridgehead was secure. Artillery was dragged across, tanks rumbled forward. The Meuse had fallen. But behind the triumph lay a darker picture. A soldier of the 1st Panzer Division wrote in his notebook, "My heart pounds. I cannot stop shaking. We have not slept. Some laugh wildly, some stare blankly. It is as if we are no longer men." The stimulant had done its work. It had carried them beyond normal limits. But now, cracks appeared. Some collapsed mid-march, their bodies finally rebelling. Others grew erratic, shouting or weeping uncontrollably. Doctors quietly recorded cases of paranoia and hallucination. Still, the offensive rolled forward. French lines shattered. Refugees fled in terror, clogging the roads, slowing Allied retreats. The speed of Blitzkrieg, unnatural, unstoppable, left entire divisions cut off. For the Allies, this was the darkest moment. At Dunkirk, British and French forces scrambled to escape, barely avoiding total destruction. The success of the German drive had been built not only on tactics and armor, but on sleepless men driven by chemicals. Yet in the glow of victory, the seeds of collapse were already sown. Addiction, physical damage, broken minds, the very tools that had carried the Wehrmacht to triumph would one day gnaw at its core. But in May 1940, as German tanks rolled westward, few could see the price. The Blitzkrieg seemed unstoppable, and the soldiers, eyes wide and hearts racing, pushed deeper into history's storm. By June 1940, the Western campaign was decided. Paris would fall, France would surrender, and the legend of Blitzkrieg was sealed. But behind the headlines of victory, another story unfolded. In the barracks, in the field hospitals, even on the march, the consequences of Pervitin were now impossible to ignore. Soldiers who had marched and fought without pause began to collapse. Some shook uncontrollably. Others fell into sudden crushing sleep that lasted for days. A few suffered heart failure. Doctors called it the crash. For men who had seemed superhuman, the fall was brutal. Letters home reveal the hidden struggle. One infantryman wrote to his wife, "My body trembles though I am still. I cannot find rest, even in silence. We are given tablets to endure, but they leave us hollow." German medical officers sent reports up the chain of command. The stimulant, they warned, was useful for breakthroughs, but dangerous for long campaigns. Addiction spread quickly. Some men begged their superiors for more pills, even when supplies ran low. And yet, demand only grew. By the end of 1940, Temmler had produced tens of millions more tablets. Pervitin was not only for the front lines, it appeared in factories, in the Luftwaffe, even in the civilian population. Germany itself was becoming chemically dependent. Meanwhile, the human cost of Blitzkrieg was written in cemeteries across Europe. Tens of thousands lay buried, soldiers who never saw the victory they helped create. Their comrades carried the weight not only of memory, but of exhaustion carved into their bones. Some survivors remembered the eerie nights on campaign, the quiet moments when the pills wore thin and men whispered in fear. Voices cracked, hands clutched rifles like lifelines. The artificial courage faded, leaving only raw, broken humanity. For the Allies, the lesson was bitter. They had underestimated not just German tactics, but the unnatural endurance of an army chemically altered. They now prepared for the long war ahead, one that would not be decided by speed alone. And inside the German ranks, one question lingered. How long could a nation fight on pills before the cost came due? The answer would reveal itself slowly across the Eastern Front, the deserts of Africa, and in the broken bodies of men who once believed they were unstoppable. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the truth about Germany's chemical soldiers slowly emerged. Millions of tablets had passed through the hands of Wehrmacht troops, from Poland to France, from the sands of North Africa to the frozen steppes of Russia. Pervitin had carried men far beyond human limits, but victory was fleeting. The same pills that fueled the Blitzkrieg left behind shattered bodies and haunted minds. Veterans described tremors that never ceased, hearts that raced even in sleep, dreams that burned with confusion and terror. Some could not live without the tablets. Addiction followed them home. Families watched in silence as husbands and fathers tried to live normal lives, but their hands shook, their tempers flared, and their nights were sleepless. Germany had created not only a war machine, but a generation scarred by chemistry. The legacy of Pervitin stretched beyond the battlefield. Its mass production was an early chapter in the story of methamphetamine itself, a drug that, decades later, would reappear in streets and homes across the world. Different name, same devastating power. For historians, the Blitzkrieg remains a story of strategy, technology, and leadership. But beneath the armor and the aircraft lies another truth. That chemical warfare was waged not only against enemies, but against the soldiers themselves. Memorials across Europe honor the fallen. Graves lie in silence under rows of crosses and stones. There are no tablets there, only names, only the quiet weight of sacrifice. For survivors, the memory was complex. Some admitted that without Pervitin, they would have collapsed long before victory. Others said the drug stole their humanity, leaving them hollow even in triumph. One veteran whispered years later, "It was not courage that carried us. It was powder. And it left us broken today." When we look back at the lightning war of 1940, we see more than tactics. We see the dark marriage of science and war. We see how one pill helped topple nations and how its shadow lingers even now. As the sun sets on the battlefields of Europe, we remember the roar of engines, the endless marches, the wide, unblinking eyes of boys turned into soldiers, and then the silence that follows when the pills wear off. And history asks us to listen.